President Donald Trump's promises to punish the Iranian theocratic leaders for their massacre of protesters across the country have yet to be fulfilled. His repeated warnings that the United States could carry out a military action against Iran have raised expectations among their allies, adversaries, domestic audiences, and most especially among people in Iran. Yet, at a ceremony at the World Economic Forum that took place in Davos, Switzerland, on Thursday, Trump went on stage and claimed that the United States had received negotiating demands from the Islamic Republic and that they would accept it. Several political, military, and strategic factors might explain why the Trump administration has not yet decided to carry out a military strike against Iran. Comparing to almost every military strike that the United States has carried out in the Middle East in recent decades, any possible attack on Iran seems riskier than all. Iran possesses challenging missile power, has regional proxy forces, and even is able to disrupt global energy markets through the Strait of Hormuz. When President George W. Bush ordered American army to carry out a strike in Iraq in 2003, Saddam Hussein's regime had even been stripped off its middle-range missiles, and they had been under harsh economic embargo for more than a decade. That's why, in comparison, a large country like Iran with its military capacity could pose significant challenge if the United States decided to go in war with the Islamic Republic of Iran. However, according to some analysts, this military strength can be considered as one of the most drives behind any possible strike against the Iranian regime. The reason is obvious. The United States cannot tolerate one of its adversaries, especially in the Middle East, to possess such military capability. Another reason for Trump's apparent hesitation regarding a military action against Iran might be that the end game for the United States if involved in such a war would not be so clear. The United States obviously can easily destroy Iran's infrastructure, destroy Iran's nuclear and missile programs, and eliminate key players at the top echelon of the regime's leadership, but it cannot resolve political issues just relying on military means. This is a conclusion that can be drawn from the previous U.S. military actions in countries such as Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. Another problem that Trump is dealing with is his international approach. He disapproves of sending troops abroad to get involved in long-term wars or endless wars. Trump, instead, prioritizes American lives and economic interests. Therefore, starting a war with Iran is a contradiction even if Trump administration points to the human rights violation as their main drive to do so. The fourth main reason can be this. It seems impossible for the United States to seek international support beyond its close allies in NATO. There is no doubt that if the United States could have Russia's approval of any such attack, it would be easier for Trump to go in that direction. Not only has Russia-Ukraine war made it impossible for America and Russia to agree on such matter, but Russia is also the first international superpower that has been backing the Iranian regime for decades, even during the Soviet Union. This impossibility plays a significant role, especially when Donald Trump always tries to rather portray himself as a peace broker. Furthermore, Trump is cautious not to take any decision that will lead to disruption in the oil markets. Any such disruption would certainly contribute to increasingly high oil prices, a change that would be detrimental to U.S. economy and its European allies' economies, at least in the short term. On the other hand, as China is the main buyer of oil from Iran, any such interruption in Iran's oil supply would certainly do harm to China, the extent of which would be so great that Donald Trump cannot ignore this factor. Another factor that should be considered in this regard is Trump's negotiating style. He is famous for his approach known as peace through strength. He always uses threats as leverage to achieve his goals when negotiating with U.S. adversaries. However, Iran has shown that they would not make a considerable concession to the extent that put the strategic goals in jeopardy. This approach is being backed up by Iran's hardline leadership. This kind of determination from Iranian leadership may in itself be one of the main drives for Trump to opt for a military action. The last reason for Trump's apparent hesitation to go ahead with any military plan against Iran can be related to the future of the country. There are fears of possible unintended political consequences inside Iran. Some analysts argue that the U.S. airstrike with the aim of weakening the Islamic Republic of Iran but not toppling it would strengthen the hardline factions and weaken domestic opposition. This argument seems illogical as the hardliners and Iranian jihadists have been taking the control of the country for decades. It also seems impossible for any internal opposition to be able to bring about any meaningful changes in Iran since the regime cannot tolerate any reform. All in all, we can say, strategically speaking, the United States is likely to consider a military campaign aiming at toppling the regime as advantageous and in line with their long-term policies. Therefore, it's highly likely that Trump administration's apparent hesitation is nothing other than preparing the ground so that any negative consequences are reduced and the chances of achieving U.S. political and economic goals are increased.